City Center Radio. It is episode 378, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. Happy Wednesday, happy June, and of course, happy Pride Month as well. I hope you all are doing amazing out there and having a great week. We've got a good show for you. Not really anything else to talk about today as far as what's going on in Holy City Centerland. So I'll do my normal. If you need plans, go to holycitycenter.com/calendar, see what's going on in town. And of course, just go to the website itself to get the latest news. You can also sign up for my daily-ish email blast. If you don't follow me on social media platforms, or even if you do, you know how algorithms are. I'm sure you're often missing some posts and events. I can't tell you how many times I'll see a message or a friend will say, "Oh, I had no idea this was coming up. You should have posted about it." And I'm like, "I did 3 months ago and multiple times on different platforms." So this is a great way just another way to make sure you're not missing any of the latest news in that daily newsletter. It's not just Holy City Center posts. I also share, from local outlets, especially those bigger stories that I don't cover. So I'm making sure that you're not missing out on anything. So be sure to do that. You can find the sign up right on the homepage. All right, enough self-promotion. Let's get into the latest news. Big story that happened this weekend. Around 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, around 200 federal, state, and local agents conducted what was called Operation Last Stand at the Alamo nightclub in Summerville. Get it? Last Stand, Alamo. So clever. In any event, this raid resulted in at least 80 arrests and recovery of drugs, guns, and a missing juvenile. This is according to officials who had a press conference on Monday where they provided details. This started, you probably saw local news covering that there was some sort of operation involving ICE. Then it came out, okay, it sounds like it's in the Summerville area, but there wasn't a ton of details until this press conference. There's a lot of these raids that are happening across the country. It's hard to know at this point if they're happening more just because they are, or it seems like they're happening more because they're getting, so much more coverage, especially when some of these raids have led to the arrests and deportation of people who are innocent of anything, including people who were here legally. So, the federal government hasn't been able to be, we were wrong about, maybe they were involved in some gang activity, but, they were here in this country without any documentation. So, they could always fall back on that. But we've seen multiple instances where people who were allowed to be here in different ways have been deported and then moved to some foreign country, not their country where they're from, some other country, and they're just in a jail. So I know there's that background. But I also will say a lot of the crimes that they discuss in here are very much people who deserve to be arrested. And if they're here without any documentation, should be deported. So this isn't one of those, I'm up in arms, this doesn't seem right. But at the same time, these things have a weird trend lately of, some details coming out later. Like, oh, remember that big roundup they did? Yeah, they did get a bunch of criminals, which is great. But there's also 2 people who actually didn't do anything wrong, and they've still been, sitting in jail or, whatever it is. So just keep in mind that everything I am providing is from news reports, and local news outlets are getting them directly from this press conference. And so they're banking on the fact that police and federal officials are telling the truth. So just keep that in mind that, yeah, a lot of these crimes, this isn't one of those things necessarily to get outraged over, but there's always a chance that we don't have the full story. But in any event, here's what we do know so far. There are about 200 individuals that were gathered at this club. It's on Highway 78, and again, this is in Summerville. One of the authorities called it a cartel after party. Okay, whatever that means. Everyone on the premises was checked for identification. Apparently, they had an idea that they had 116 previously filed arrest warrants. And so they were hoping there was going to be some of those folks at this place. And apparently there was, because they ended up serving 80 citizens and non-citizens with those arrest warrants. The special agent in charge said that 66 of those 80 people were in the U.S. illegally, and five had criminal warrants. The sheriff said that two individuals arrested. This is the Charleston County Sheriff, Carl Ritchie, said that the two individuals arrested were, quote unquote, high level cartel members, with groups like Los Zetas and Tren de Aragua. And they expect that the number of those arrested determined to have gang affiliations will grow. So they're expecting some of the other people they've arrested are going to turn up to be gang members as well, which is also, again, like, okay, well, if you're serving these arrest warrants, you kind of have an idea of who these people are. Probably already know if they're affiliated with the gang or not, but okay. Another person that they found actually had an international warrant from Interpol as a murder suspect from Honduras. And then lastly, officials said some individuals recovered are believed to be human trafficking victims and are currently being provided assistance. So again, big story. This many arrests, this big of an operation involving this many, police, whether it's local or on the federal level like ICE, big story. And again, it certainly seems like plenty, if not all, deserve to be arrested. And granted, of course, we're just taking the word from police, but we know how warrants work and things like that. In all likelihood, these are folks that indeed committed crimes. Now, they should have their day in court and due process and all that. And if it turns out they're innocent, then, hopefully they'll have that day in court and they'll be proven innocent. But like I said, we're basing this just on, what the authorities have said. What else can, you really do? Now, I'm sure local news organizations, and I'm sure national ones might be too, because I did see this get some talk on national news programs or in, national outlets, whether they're newspapers, TV, etc. And, if there are some folks that got rounded up and shouldn't have been, well, hopefully they will be released back, into, wherever they are, living here in the Charleston, Summerville area. Hopefully we won't see something where someone who has not committed any crime and has proper documentation, is not deported like we've seen. So, but so far, that is what we know. Anything else, like I just said, like, oh, this could have, that's all speculation. Everything here 100% could be on the up and up, from the authority side. And then they did their job to get some criminals arrested. But, we'll certainly keep an eye on it in case anything comes out. Because, like I said, there's been other instances where it's not always exactly what it seems, or some people got rounded up that shouldn't have. So we'll certainly be keeping an eye on all of that. In a related story, now related in the sense that it involves ICE arrests and this area. This particular story is not tied to the raid I just mentioned. And it's tough because it has to do with a low country mother that says she is currently living in fear and heartbreak after her husband was arrested by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is ICE. And now she's in fear that she'll be next. Now, that's horrible. That's heartbreaking. The other side to that is that her and her husband are both in this country without legal permission. So, yes, these are folks who don't have documentation, and those folks can be deported. So, there's the one side that you want, there's the humanity side to it, but then, hey, what do we do when there are indeed folks who don't have legal permission to be here and that's discovered? Well, by law, well, of course they should be given due process. That's the big thing, but assuming that all that goes through and it's true, I mean, it is what it is. But there is still a human side to all of this. This is a woman who has a family here. Her three kids were born here, so her kids are residents because of birthright citizenship, which of course clouds the water. And they're young. They have a child as young as 3, and they've been here for over 10 years and paying taxes and things like that. And so it's a very tough situation when, again, yeah, she's telling Live 5 News in this interview that she did that they don't have legal permission to be here. Um, and so, yeah, by that definition, assuming it's true, they shouldn't be here. But again, this is a human, and they left a country where they didn't feel safe, and I'll get into those details. And it's a very tough situation. This isn't one of those, like the raid where people are being rounded up and they've allegedly committed any manner of really big crimes. This is a family, by the accounts of from what the wife is saying, as well as what Live 5 News is reporting. Besides not having legal permission to be here, they haven't done anything against the law. So the wife went on to say that the man, who has no criminal record, was arrested while he drove on I-26 on his way home from work back on April 28th. He was then transferred to the Folkston Ice Processing Center, which is in a town called Folkston in Georgia, which is about 200 miles away from here. And now, by the way, Live 5 News did not share her name or her husband's name, because the wife is, of course, worried about, not just her name. They didn't show her face either. She's certainly worried that she could be put into an ice processing center. And then what happens to the children who are U.S. citizens? So this woman is now raising their three kids. All are young. Like I said, the youngest is 3. She now has to raise them all alone while this is going on. She was surprised when she got the call from her husband and actually thought he was joking at first, that he'd been taken into ICE custody. Obviously, that did not happen, or it was not a joke, I should say. It did indeed happen, that he was arrested and or whatever taken into custody, whatever the appropriate terminology is. And it happened after ICE agents were spotted near a job site he was working on Daniel Island. The woman says that her husband has no prior criminal history, not even a speeding ticket. Both have lived and worked in the Low Country for over a decade each, and they've just been trying, in her words, to provide a stable home for their children and build a better life than what they had back in Mexico, where they're originally from. She said that they pay taxes. They try to do everything that good members of society should do. It's just that their home country didn't provide security or opportunity, so they came to the United States to try to get that for themselves and, of course, their children. And like many people in this situation, now, of course, there are certainly people who come here and don't have documentation and don't have permission to be here, that are criminals, either before they come here or turn into criminals when they get here, or both. And there are people that come here for nefarious reasons. There's no doubt about that. But there's a lot of people like this Charleston mother. Obviously, we're taking her word for it. Who knows the truth, but this seems like someone who's telling the truth, that they just left a country that didn't have the opportunities that they needed and wanted for not just themselves but their children, and they wanted to feel safer. And now, of course, the exact opposite is happening. And they came here not to break any laws, but to escape danger and poverty in the country that they came from. And so that's where this humanity thing comes in, where it's like, I mean, are these really the people that, federal authorities need to be really cracking down on? Like, yeah, absolutely. Real criminals who have committed crimes, serious crimes especially, those folks need to be, brought to justice. But is this what they're doing? Wasting their time on people who have been here for over a decade, are paying taxes, apparently have had no run-ins with the law whatsoever, and this is what they're wasting their time on. And again, I get it, by law, by the fact that they're not allowed to be here legally, this is what can happen. And but I shared the story just to show that can we have a humane way? Is there something we can do differently with these folks versus ones that have come here, don't have legal permission to be here, and have committed actual crimes? It just seems like there's got to be a better way, and that people are getting swept up because this administration wants to be able to say, hey, we've, deported X amount of, illegal criminals. And they're going to say, well, if you're here without legal permission, that makes you a criminal. And so they're going to want to have this big number that they can say and, go to their base and say, hey, we told you we do this. And so in an effort to boost those numbers, I mean, people like this are getting swept up. And to me, it just seems there's got to be a better way to do it, while still acknowledging that, yeah, I know by our current laws, they're not legally supposed to be here, the mother and the father anyway. It's a tough situation for sure with some of these things that are going on. In others, it's clear. No, federal authorities did the right thing. These folks need to be arrested, or federal authorities did the absolute wrong thing. This person should not have been deported, especially without due process. But even if they were clearly guilty of whatever crime, they still deserve due process. So there's still a lot that's not going right here, even when it seems that some people deserve to be arrested or detained or whatever. it- Regardless of how horrific their crimes may be, they deserve due process as well. So there's all manner of issues with this whole, enforcement that's been going on, and we're starting to see some of it here, obviously, in the Low Country. And there's not easy answers in every situation, but you have to feel for someone like her who, just came here for a better life and is building that for their three young children. And now she's scared and has to look over her shoulder and be worried about that. And again, I get it. That's the risk they took by coming here. That they might have to look over their shoulders sometimes. But, as just, again, as a human, like, how could you not feel for someone like her? I know I'm rambling because this is a tough discussion topic, but I hope you guys can kind of understand what I'm saying here. All right. So, as I've talked about several episodes ago, legislature has wrapped up its year. We've talked about some of the laws that did go into effect, some things that are going to, basically see if maybe they come up in the next session. So, just I want to do a couple quick hits of things that officially are now laws. This one may not affect you unless you own a golf cart, but many people out there do in this area, or you may at some point. But there is a new state law that lets cities set their own rules for where and when golf carts can be driven on South Carolina roadways. However, it does require a new rule for passengers, and that is any children under 12 must buckle up. So, this legislation passed both the House and Senate with basically no opposition, and then Governor Henry McMaster signed it into law, I think like a week ago, and it went into effect immediately. So this is the case now. So, long story short, no matter where you are in South Carolina, if you're in a golf cart and you're with a child that is under 12, they must have a seatbelt on. Period. End of sentence. Under 12, sorry, not 12 and under 12 must have a seatbelt. What does differ city to city or county to county are where you can drive golf carts, like which type of roadways, which areas, and hours that you are allowed to do so. The state basically said cities, they can figure out that side of things. Maybe some communities are fine with golf carts all the time and anywhere, while other communities, say like downtown Charleston, no, we don't want golf carts on just any road and at any time. And so if you have a golf cart, make sure you're following whatever your city or town's rules are for that. But regardless, the only thing that is consistent across the state is that anyone under 12 must buckle up. So keep that in mind. Another piece of legislation, I really hope no one who's listening is worried about getting in trouble for this, because that'd be bad. But I'm sharing, unlike the last one, like, hey, just heads up, if you have a kid, make sure you're doing this. This is more of a wait, this wasn't illegal already, and that is publishing revenge porn is now officially a crime in South Carolina. So again, wait. That wasn't already a crime? Well, no, apparently not. I'm sure there were probably cases where it could be tied into some other statute, but officially, there was no law against posting, nude images of people online. And it's a little bit more than that, too. It also involves AI. So here are the details. State legislators, and Governor Henry McMaster, I think about a week ago, finally, he signed into law. They had like a press conference and made a whole thing out of it, where they did, finally put this law into place, where it will criminalize the posting of intimate or nude photos without a person's consent. This is what's commonly known as revenge porn, as I've been saying. So, under the new law, it is also a crime to share intimate images that are generated by artificial intelligence without the consent of the person depicted. So, I think that was some good foresight by folks who were putting this, the legislators that were putting this together. They didn't just say, hey, just your real images. They're like, oh wait, we've got this new AI thing which is causing all sorts of other issues. And it's you can make images of people that look very, very real, videos of people that look really real. So I'm glad that they were able to incorporate that. It just makes a lot of sense based on where that technology is going. Now, as far as punishments, it is now a felony for anyone who shares intimate images with the intent to cause harm to the person depicted. That's the big caveat to if it's a felony or not. We'll get into when it's not a felony. A first offense carries a maximum fine of $5,000 and up to 5 years in prison. A second or following offense carries a maximum fine of $10,000 and a prison sentence of 1 to 10 years. And yes, there are also penalties for individuals who share intimate images without intending to harm the person depicted. I don't know how that's something I'm sure there'll be a court case at some point, how you determine if they intended to harm someone or not. I'm sure in some instances it's very clear harm was meant. But if you're posting something without their permission, I mean, maybe you're not trying to harm them. But in any event, we'll see how that plays out at some point, I'm sure. But in those scenarios, a first offense is a misdemeanor versus the felony, and it's punishable by a maximum fine of $5,000 and up to a year in prison, while a second offense is a felony. So it can, even if, I didn't intend harm, but this is the second time I did it, well, now you're in, felony territory. And that second offense is punishable by a maximum fine of $5,000 and up to 5 years in prison. So those are the details on that law. A rare win, just like the seatbelt law for our legislators. They every once in a while do actually get some good laws on the books. So this is not me being snarky about it or anything like that. Definitely glad that these things are now passed. And again, just a little shocked that this particular one wasn't already illegal, but glad it is now at least. And the last political update, Columbia City Council once again deferred voting on repealing its 2021 conversion therapy ban during a special called meeting back on May 27th. There was a 3-hour plus long meeting that culminated in the same way that their last meeting on May 20th ended, which is essentially kicking the can down the road. The council voted 6-1 to defer the vote. So if you don't remember, this is talking about conversion therapy for any kids who identify anywhere in the LGBTQ community. It's been widely discredited as being harmful. It doesn't work. And so Columbia is the only city in South Carolina that banned anyone from practicing conversion therapy. However, there's been a little bit of a push from people like Attorney General Alan Wilson and on the national level to repeal that ban, allowing conversion therapy to come back. So that's the background. And now twice Columbia City Council has deferred, we'll just do this at another time. So it's an update. That's not really an update because we're exactly where we were a few weeks back, but just wanted to make sure you all knew where that stood. And whenever it finally does come up, and if they finally do make a decision, I will be sure to pass that along. And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I'll be back with you later this week. Already looking forward to it. But until then, good night and good luck.